Welcome to another edition of Inlandia Literary Journeys. For the Press Enterprise, I'm Metro Editor John Bender. I'm here with Orlando Ramirez, editor of La Prensa, Katie Porter, executive director of the Inlandia Institute, and author Martin Lastrapes. Martin, I hope I got your name right.
You did, yeah, Martin Lastrapes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, tell us, Martin, you've written a book, Inside the Outside, that's gotten quite a bit of acclaim. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I've been pretty fortunate, I think. I put the book out in the summer of 2011, and it's my first novel, and I published it independently. So I was sort of, I think I was sort of pushing a boulder uphill for a long time. And when the book first came out, I was having trouble just to get anybody to look at it. I was emailing reviewers and bloggers and just anybody to get their eyes on it. And once I got one blogger to look at it and read about it and wrote something nice about it, I think that kind of made it a little bit easier to kind of validate it for other bloggers, and then pretty soon readers were finding it. And relatively quickly, much faster than I would have expected, it was on the bestseller list on Amazon. And then within about a year, I started winning some really great prizes, something that I couldn't have predicted. It won the Grand Prize in the Paris Book Festival in the spring of 2012. It also won first prize in fiction in the Hollywood Book Festival, and it was runner-up in New York Book Festival and the San Francisco Book Festival. So it started pretty small, and it still feels very much like a small sort of mom and shop project, but it's got some nice momentum the last 2 years.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's not what you would call a typical novel.
No, not at all. It's I call it a literary horror novel, which I think is a semi-official term. But to be honest with you, I mean, well, it's about a cult of cannibals up in the mountains. And even though that sounds like horror, when I was writing it, and I always feel silly thinking about it, I never thought of it as horror. I just thought I was writing, a literary novel about cannibals up in the mountains. And it gets bloody and violent, and there's gory scenes. But when I was learning how to write, especially when I was in college at Cal State San Bernardino and taking literature classes and writing classes, I was introduced to a lot of literary work. So in my mind, this was a literary novel. And it wasn't until a friend of mine read an early draft that she told me it was a horror novel. And of course it made sense to me afterwards, cannibals and blood and stuff. But so I kind of feel like it's a mixture. I feel like the tone of the book, the language of the book, even the writing, I think appeals to an audience who likes literary fiction. But there's also, the horror tone of the book that very much has resonated with a lot of fans who enjoy horror novels. And again, I have at this point, I've collected a lot of readers and fans who like horror fiction. And I almost sometimes feel like, I don't know, I don't want to say like I feel like a fraud. I just feel like I've sort of accidentally found myself in a world that I wasn't expecting to. But they've been some of my most supportive fans.
Now, by publishing independently, tell us about that. So, you self-published? Did you?
Absolutely, yeah, I self-published. So my initial goal was to publish traditionally, which, find a literary agent, have them represent me, get myself into a publishing house, something like that. Again, pretty much all the writers that I enjoy and look up to, that was kind of the path they took, so I figured, let me take their path. And as most any writer can tell you, it's a really difficult path to just finding the agent before you even get the book published. Just finding an agent is a difficult path. So I invested goodness, I don't know, I would say at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, just sending out query letters, contacting agents, collecting mostly rejections, which I was ready for. That's part of the journey. I'd say about a year and a half into it, I had 2 close calls with a couple of agents, both of whom seemed interested in the novel. I think they liked the story, they liked the writing, but I think when it came down to whatever decisions agents have to make, ultimately I think they felt like they weren't certain that they could sell this novel to an audience, which, from a business perspective, I understand. It didn't make it any more fun to get the no, but I understood it. So then I was at a crossroads. Do I stay on this road of trying to find an agent and trying to go the traditional route, which, maybe I get to the finish line, but maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, I have no idea. Or do I take it upon myself to get this book out there, which I didn't know what that entailed. There was still, for me, the thing that made me nervous about it is within, I think, the culture of writers and readers, there's a certain bit of resistance, a little bit of a stigma about authors publishing their own work. And I knew that, and I took my work seriously, and I wanted to be taken seriously. So that's the part that scared me the most. And then,
did you have somebody edit it with you?
not the story. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I didn't have a professional editor. I wrote the book, and I had a couple of friends of mine read early drafts of it, which was very helpful. The two most helpful readers I had was S.K. Murphy, who was a writing professor, also a friend of mine, and also James Brown, who's a terrific writer and memoirist. He was probably the most helpful. He read the draft right before the final draft, and he really helped me pinpoint some stuff that there were some problems in the book, and I knew they were there, I just couldn't figure them out. And so he read the draft, he sort of pointed out some things, and then once I got that, I kind of knew what to do. Then the final draft, I more or less edited myself, which was scary, because I didn't, on the one hand, I didn't know if it was ready. On the other hand, because I was putting it together myself, I didn't know if I could afford an editor. So I sort of kind of rolled the dice that I think this is good. And so then I went ahead and put it out there.
So your success is somewhat more sweet because you forgoed, the agent, that whole process, and you did it by yourself, and obviously you've been getting some acclaim for it, and
yeah,
not just sales wise, but also all the different awards you've been winning.
Yeah, and honestly, when I put the book out, my only goal, and it was a meager one, but it was a sincere goal, was if just one person who I don't know, who's not legally bound to love me and support me, just one person out in the world, if they find the book and they read and they enjoy it, I was going to be happy with that. And honestly, I think the first person I had heard back from, maybe just a stranger on the internet who liked the book, it felt like such a victory that I kind of felt like, that I had done it. And then, again, to my surprise, it kind of kept following. More people were finding the book, more people were enjoying it. The sales were doing well. Reviews were coming in, and like all that stuff. Honestly, and I'm being so sincere. Once I got that first reader, I really felt like I'd won. And everything after that, even today, even hanging out with you guys, has been just been just gravy. It's been wonderful.
So, where did you come up with the concept for this story? It's a cult of cannibals living in the San Bernardino Mountains.
Yeah, it was born. I guess maybe it was born a couple of places. The first place it might have been born is I'm a vegetarian, and so when I was in school at Cal State San Bernardino, I wish I could remember the name of the story that would make this But basically, I read a story. It was a short story, and I remember it was about sort of a sci-fi story, and there was it was about aliens and sort of a human plantation. But I remember the teacher explaining that this was an allegory. It was basically an allegory about slavery, but they were using aliens and humans. And I just thought that was the coolest idea. It was my first time really kind of understanding what an allegory was and sort of an allegorical story could be. And so right around that same time, I became a vegetarian, and I was kind of reading some literature on I guess like agri-farms and stuff like that. And so I thought it might be kind of interesting to try my own allegory. I think really I was just trying to be like that one cool author whose name unfortunately I can't remember for this interview. So I thought instead of farming animals, what if there was people? And so then that was kind of the initial birthplace of this story about cannibals. The other place it was born, I was watching an HBO documentary about the mafia hitman Richard the Iceman Kuklinski. And it was a 3-part documentary HBO did, and the third part was the Iceman and the Psychiatrist. And I was absolutely fascinated with this guy. He was terrifying. He made it hard to sleep that night. But he was also sort of charming and humorous. And there were stretches of the documentary where I would almost forget that he did these really, really awful things. And so then that type of character fascinated me, a character who did really bad things, but I was still, if not sympathetic towards, I was very much engaged by him. So then I had these two ideas about, I wanted to create a character who did bad things unapologetically, and was also very sort of an engaging, if not sympathetic character, and then cannibalism. So I kind of put these two things together. The final piece of the puzzle, which I guess would be the cult, is... As a storyteller, I was trying to figure out, okay, whoever this killer is in my book, they kill unapologetically, but I need the reader to like them. So how can I justify this person killing and still have the reader like them? So then I thought, well, maybe they were raised in a place where killing was not only normal, but maybe sort of a necessity, so I thought, well, maybe cannibals. And so then I thought, well, if they're cannibals, they can't get caught, so maybe I got to put them in a cult somewhere, but it's really got to be remote. So what if they live up in the mountains? And it just really just step by step trying to justify how they could exist, how nobody can know about them. And it became this whole intricate thing, but really it all started with just a simple idea of I wanted to create sort of a character, if not quite an anti-hero, but just somebody who, did bad things, but the reader would still like them. That was the real, I think, initial seed.
So, is the book set in the IE?
It is, yeah. Yeah, the cult itself is set in the San Bernardino Mountains, and in the early draft of the book, I actually took out a map of the mountains, and the setting of the cult, it's fictional, but I tried to find a place on the map that seemed like it could reasonably be placed, and I think in the early first or second chapter of the book, I even give some rough directions as to where you might actually find it.
So where is it, Big Bear or?
It's that was somewhere, I don't know anymore, honestly. Although I'll tell you what, though, I've had a couple people who live up in the mountains who've read the book. Many of them tell me like, I think I know where it is. I've been there. I've seen that place. And other people who've told me I even if this place isn't real, I think I know these people. I think you might not be that far from the truth, and that was actually kind of I hope it's not real, but it was still kind of validating that it might have actually that I might have sort of stumbled onto some authenticity. So the first half of the book takes place in the mountains. The second half of the book takes place in Rancho Cucamonga. But overall, the Inland Empire, yeah.
So you're from Rancho?
Yeah, I grew up there. My parents moved there when I was 6 months old, so all my memories are growing up in Rancho. Same house I grew up in for my whole life. Went to all the schools out there, including Chaffey College. I went to Cal State San Bernardino. And I even still live in the Inland Empire now. I still live in Rancho Cucamonga, so I feel very much ingrained in the. It's really all I know is Rancho Cucamonga and the Inland Empire.
Very nice. Can you share something from your book with us?
Oh yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Yeah, I have Let me go ahead and find it for you. I have a chapter that's titled "The Inland Empire."
Martin, how many copies did you have printed when you first put this out?
Oh, okay. So that's one of the. When I was doing my research on publishing, one of the things I found out, I discovered a technology called print on demand, which is just, especially for an independent publisher, it's the best technology. So the way print on demand works is there's basically a digital copy of the book that exists in an inventory with the printer distributor that I work with, and so what they do is they have the digital copy in their catalog, and then when somebody orders the book on Amazon or through Barnes and Noble, or maybe another online seller, the order goes to the printer, and they literally print out a single book to that order, and then they pack it, they ship it to that reader. So as a publisher, since ultimately I finance myself, it saves probably countless thousands of dollars that publishers independent before me would have had to spend. Now I don't have to spend any money on inventory. Somebody buys the book, and basically the cost of printing and distribution is built into the printing, so I don't ever have to write a check to the distributor. That's all taken care of, and so it's a really, really wonderful technology for independent publishers.
Do you know how many copies have been printed to date?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number. Every 3 or 4 months, I'll get an inventory. I'll get an invoice from the distributor. That's a great question. I would say at least 1,000, probably more than that at this point. And that's the print books. The e-books is actually where I would say the majority of my sales is in the e-book and the digital market. The print books have almost become they've almost become exclusively, when I do author events, whether it's a book signing or a reading. And I found that, and not just with myself, I've talked to a lot of independent publishers, and they all say the same thing, that the ebooks is really where their readers are sort of finding the book. So the chapter I like to read, it's a short one too. It's about 2.5 pages. It's chapter 18, and it's called The Inland Empire. And when I wrote it, the idea was that I wanted to write a love letter to the Inland Empire, because when I was growing up, I loved television and I loved movies, and I kind of found that whenever I watched TV and movies, there was never any mention of the Inland Empire. No one ever mentioned Rancho Cucamonga, and I kind of developed like this complex as a kid. Like I felt like I lived in this invisible town, and the only places that existed were whatever, Los Angeles or San Francisco or anybody outside of this place. And so I kind of wrote this chapter both as a love letter to the community I grew up in, but also I think I wrote it for that smaller version of myself who wished that there was some reference of his town in any sort of medium. The Inland Empire is an eclectic region of Southern California, encompassing most every city north of San Diego and east of Los Angeles, with a rich history that nobody knows about, including most of the people who live there. I didn't know an awful lot about it myself until I started this project and decided that in order to properly tell Timber's story, I needed to learn more about where she grew up. San Bernardino is one of the anchor cities of the Inland Empire, as well as the gateway to the San Bernardino Mountains. It's had many faces over the last 150 years or so, from farming community to saloon hangout, and eventually to the city that birthed the Hells Angels and became one of the foremost manufacturers and suppliers of crystal meth. It used to be a place of railroad trains and horse-powered ambulances, acres of orange groves and magnificent brick buildings. It was a place where children could go to class barefoot in overalls and grow up to drive Model T automobiles. It was a place where Hollywood studios used to bring their movies, making it the preview capital during the first half of the 20th century, ushering in all the top stars of the time to take a look at their latest films. It was a place where McDonald's first opened its doors, selling 15-cent hamburgers. It's a place where grapes were squeezed and wine was had. It's a place where great and devious men laid the seeds of history, where schools were named to honor them, and streets named so as not to forget them. San Bernardino is a place synonymous with the historic Route 66, that long stretch of road that would take you across America and back, which was traveled by gamblers and lounge singers with Vegas in their sights, by hippies and surfers with dreams of the Pacific, by teenagers intoxicated by the innocent danger of the road, and by weary travelers looking for a place to sleep. Route 66, as it passes through the Inland Empire, is locally called Foothill Boulevard, a major street that connects the neighboring cities like a candy necklace: San Bernardino, Rialto, Fontana, and most notably, as it concerns Timber's story, Rancho Cucamonga. There is no emperor who rules over the Inland Empire, but if there were, his kingdom would be Rancho Cucamonga. Rancho Cucamonga is a large community, the crown jewel of the Inland Empire, easily the richest of the surrounding cities, and without question the most conservative. The high schools are built like universities, and Chaffey College, the local two-year institution, was deemed important enough to host a speaking engagement for President Bill Clinton. Even still, despite the overwhelming prosperity of this community built on grapes and wine, Rancho Cucamonga has clear socio-economic divisions, with the proverbial line drawn in the sand separating north and south. In the northern half, the houses are big, the schools are clean, and everybody has a manicured lawn. In the southern half, the houses seem to shrink, like some alternate universe. The schools exist in outdated buildings, and the street corners are less inviting when the sun goes down. It was in the northern, more prosperous half of Rancho Cucamonga where Timber found refuge from the divinity, where she spent 5 years salvaging her life with the help of Billy D. Luscious and Ginger Falls. In Timber's happier moments in Rancho Cucamonga, when she was not at peace, when she was most at peace with her life and the tragic circumstances that informed it, she wouldn't know that Three Marlowe was out there lurking, biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to take it all away.
Wow. Very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So this has been another episode of Inlandia Literary Journeys. Be sure to read the print column in the Press Enterprise every Tuesday. Also, come visit the blog, which is updated throughout the week, where you'll be able to see other videos like this one as well. And of course, it's also available on the Inlandia site. So for John Bender, Katie Porter, Martin Lastrapes, and myself, Orlando Ramirez, thank you for visiting with us today.